So of course, this is the weekend that we have a bank holiday for Martin Luther King Jr. tomorrow. This is one of those things where my brother and I were looking this up. We went to trivia on Friday, and we were trying to remember, when did Martin Luther King Day come into being? And of course, had to read through the sordid history that even brought it into where we find ourselves today. There are states in this nation that refused to call it Martin Luther King Day until the 90s. There are states in this nation, one of them just north of us, who didn't want to ratify it until 90. It's quite remarkable when you think about the kinds of things that we talk about at this time of year that we don't seem to remember how to talk about at other times of the year. So one of the things that I was thinking about with what it means to lift up all that Martin Luther King was, is, could have been, has to do with what one does when one has a dream, and then moves on from there. The thing about dreams is that they are really hard things to sustain in the waking hours. I'm sure you've all had this experience of waking up and knowing that you had some powerful dream, and it sits on the periphery of your memory, and you start looking in the corners of your room, maybe trying to locate some piece of what that dream might have actually been. Something about something, and then it's lost. Those are the ones that happen when we're sleeping. When we write a dream down and we give a speech that is all about what that dream could possibly mean, and we invoke it regularly, the question that I have to ask is, do we remember this dream or not? Is it something that is sitting in our periphery? Something that's just hanging out there that we can't actually get our hands on, figure out how to move towards? It's as though we've been sitting for 50 years on a treadmill, and we keep on walking it, expecting that we're going to get somewhere, maybe, or we forgot to turn the treadmill on to get anywhere at all. It is not okay for us to have dreams that are as powerful as the dreams represented by Black leaders during the Civil Rights Movement and Black leaders today that we cannot remember, or that we refuse or somehow fail to take action on. It is not okay. And sometimes what I find is that we struggle to even recognize that it was a dream, or that a dream is a thing that could become real, or that anything that is aspirational doesn't mean that it sits there in silence as a thing that we've figured out, but somehow forgotten to work towards. We return again and again to the same dream. And it was beautifully articulated by Martin Luther King Jr. And when we dip back into his I Have a Dream speech, are we using it as inspiration or as a metric against we might measure ourselves and always find ourselves wanting? We go back to the dream again and again, and we look into the corners of our peripheral vision, hoping that we might see it more clearly now, or that the country might see it more clearly now, or that our neighbor, who doesn't get it as well as we do, might see it more clearly now. There's a flaw in this thinking, because you can't just think a dream into being. You can't just name it and expect it will happen. There is nothing about the big problems of our lives that don't require our active efforts. There's only so much we can do when we're staring at a stream in front of us that is full of muck before we have to start asking questions about the systems that are causing that muck to happen to begin with. Or else we are doing nothing but coming back to that same dream over and over again and waking up and hoping that it will be different this time, but recognizing that we may not have done as much as we could have to make it different ourselves. I love his dream. I love his dream so much. But what troubles me is that we have gotten to a place where the statement of the dream may have become more powerful than the actual dream itself. It becomes codified like it's on a tombstone instead of an active thing that we still have access to and can still work towards. Isn't it worth acting on? Can we only act if we force ourselves to remember each piece of the dream in every moment of our day and every body part in ourselves? Is it enough to know that we have the right beliefs if we don't act them into being? Over the past several years, we've seen the Voting Rights Act be systematically dismantled, the overturning of Roe versus Wade, other congressional actions, legal actions that are about trying to make the dream, which is one that says there is something so important about recognizing the humanness of everybody around you, their worth and inherent dignity. And if you haven't gotten to the point as a culture where worth and inherent dignity are universal, then we're still in the mode of needing to work. It is aspiration versus action. So what I just quoted was our first principle, inherent worth and dignity, which we wrote down and we return to on a regular basis as a static statement in our hymnal or as a feature of our faith. But are we acting that into being? When you move out into the world from here, do you take the notion of inherent worth and dignity of all people and do everything that you can to live that value into being? Or do you, like I do sometimes, rest on the pride of the beauty of that statement? Aren't those lovely words? Those are things I agree with. Now what do I do? We'll be talking more about the Article 2 shift that is being discussed in the UUA, the Unitarian Universalist Association, on a large scale. But the essence of it for me is that it says it's not enough for us to have aspirations if we haven't figured out how to put stepping stones of action on the way into those aspirations. It is not enough for us to say that something is worthwhile if we don't know how to act it into being better than we have been over the last 50, 60, 70, 90, 120 years. It's not enough to say that we believe something beautiful if we can't make something beautiful actually happen with our actions on a day-to-day basis. Sometimes I feel as though we're, in our current context, dealing with this huge collective shrug. It's the shrug that prompts people to come up and say, don't forget, we have some really important things happening this year. It is vital that we work to protect our democracy and respond to climate crisis. Can we do those things? Because I think sometimes we have this collective shrug that says, of course the world is going in this direction. What did we think was going to happen when we invited the authoritarians in? Did we all want the dumpster fire? It's like we want to sit around and say, they wanted to destroy the world, and we want to be able to say, we were right. They wanted to destroy the world. This is what we told you would happen. Why weren't you listening? Instead of saying, I'm not okay with destroying the world. I'm not okay with pretending that our principles and our values and our dreams are not worth working towards. One concept that sits out there quite often is this concept of beloved community. What does that mean in real accessible terms? What does it mean when we think about the idea of a beloved community that inherently values the worth and dignity of all people? Well, we know when we've gotten there. Is there a there? Is it possible to? Does it matter? Is movement in any direction towards that aim the only goal that we have? And I think sometimes in religious communities we say, we are the beloved community. And that is not a true statement. Because if there are people outside who are not part of this beloved community and whose value and inherent worth and dignity has not been affirmed, then we haven't gotten there yet. The leadership scholar Margaret Wheatley writes that there is no power greater than a community discovering what it cares about. That we should ask what's possible, not what's wrong, and keep asking until we have answers that give us direction. Notice what you care about and assume that many others share your dreams. And be brave enough to start a conversation that matters. And talk to people that you know and talk to people that you don't know. Talk to people that you never talk to. Be intrigued by the differences that you hear. Expect to be surprised. Treasure curiosity more than certainty. Invite in everybody who cares to work on what's possible. Acknowledge that everyone is an expert in something. Know that creative solutions come from new connections, from asking questions and listening to the answers, from hearing people's stories and making them part of your own understanding of what has to happen in our world. Remember that you don't fear people whose story you know. That real listening always brings people closer together, and that it is incumbent upon us to trust that meaningful connections can change our world. Meaningful connections can change our world. If you don't know where to go to start living into the dreams that we have been carrying with us or etched onto stone, start with conversation and connection. Ask yourself whether or not there are people who are outside your circle of inherent worth and dignity. Ask yourself if you've rested too long on the concept of the dream instead of acting into the dream. It's the only way that we can take what was and bequeath it to those who are coming next, because that is our job in the world right now. At this time of year, I, in the past, have given star words to people as a recognition of Epiphany, which is not something that Unitarian Universalists are usually all that familiar with. And I usually put as many words as I can possibly think of so that it's like a hodgepodge of a horoscope coming out of the basket. But I didn't do that this year. There are only a few options in here, and they're two-sided. And I did that with intention. So when you get the word that you draw out of here, what I would like you to encourage you to think about is how might the word and its other side galvanize your year, knowing that there are several other people in this congregation who received those same words. They are yoked with you in the work. They are able to ask questions of you and to receive your answers, and vice versa. They're there to hold you accountable and for you to help them stay accountable in what it looks like to be as active as we possibly can, so that we are not just dreamers, but beers and doers and changers of a world that needs us right now. So I'm going to pass this around, and then if you could give us some music while we're doing that. When you grab one, you can do it blind. You can do it by looking through. There aren't that many words. If you feel the need to receive something that has a little bit more randomness, you can do that. When I chose these words, I was trying to come up with something that would give you an opportunity to flip it over as you needed to. Is today a day in which you need to be reminded that you have power to do something? Or is today a day where you need to be reminded that love is the way you get it done? Is today a day in which you need to remember all that has come before, or to remember that you have a responsibility to what you are bequeathing to those who come after? Is today a day in which you need to figure out how to dream again? Maybe you lost it. Or do you need to remember how to move, how to make action? I think all the other ones are, what am I missing? There's one more.
Reflect, remember.
Thank you. Reflect and remember. Do you need to remember? Did I do that one or a different one? Reflect and act. Thank you. See, I was wise at one point this morning. The point is that put this somewhere that can be a reminder to you throughout the year that this is what you're taking on, that it rests with you, that any dream that gets passed along is not something that is set in stone, but is something that we write and rewrite and remake and remake if it's ever going to have any chance of coming into being. And with that in mind, I invite us to rise in body or spirit and sing our closing hymn, Love Will Guide Us, number 131. Please reach out and find somebody to connect with. You can, if you don't want to be touched, put your hands on your heart and just know that we are holding you in that space. If you are comfortable holding hands or touching shoulders, please make yourselves a mycorrhizome. Make that happen. And hear these words from Adrienne Marie Brown. Do you already know that your existence, who and how you are, is in and of itself a contribution to the people and place around you? Not after or because you do some particular thing, but simply the miracle of your life. And that the people around you and the places have contributions as well. Do you understand that your quality of life and your survival are tied to how authentic and generous the connections are between you and the people and the place you live with and in? May it be so. Amen.